Welcome back to a brand new Marvel's What If episode. Today I will be continuing episode 3 of What If Iron Man Survived the snap in Avengers Endgame. I've heard your requests for a final part 3. I wanted to dive deep into the scenario of what if Iron Man was in No Way Home, so I will be asking the question, what if events went differently? How could Iron Man change the story of Spider-Man No Way Home? And would there even be a No Way Home to begin with? After figuring out what to do with this final part, I think I've made it work. That being said, do make sure to subscribe, like, share, and turn your notifications on so you and your friends are all up to date with the fanfic content on the channel. Let's dive right into this Marvel's What If. The message was heard worldwide, and a cry for crime to end was in the air. The message haunted everyone present. Tony Stark transmitted a message to every criminal in the world that he would come for them. Spider-Man is in New York City after the events when Tony murdered Mysterio and gave up Edith to him. He didn't know what his old mentor thought of him now, and his actions that led to the deaths of Pepper and Morgan, Tony's only family. The impact of this was surely not going to be good. The crowd of people roared through the city, cheering that there was finally going to be peace, and Stark was the one who would lead them to justice. The problem remained what Tony Stark would do now that his family was annihilated in seconds. Parker watched people in the streets going wild, Iron Man fans screaming. He had a weird sense that the blame would have been on him if not for Mysterio being killed, and even his identity could have been compromised. But because of Tony's actions and being able to act fast enough, Tony took the blame and exposed Mysterio before he would act with the rest of his plans. Spider-Man turned his head to see MJ, who was in the crowd down below. She looked uncomfortable being down there, and in a split second, Spider-Man dropped below. People ran towards him asking if he was Iron Man's sidekick. People wanted photos. They called him a hero, and Peter wanted to embrace it, but because he knew the full extent of his and Tony's actions, Spider-Man grabbed MJ, swinging towards a massive skyscraper. MJ asked Peter if he was okay. Peter paused for a moment. He told MJ that he wasn't sure. He was worried about Tony and what he was capable of. If only he didn't trust Mysterio, then maybe Tony's family wouldn't have been killed. MJ slapped Peter across the face. She said he wasn't to blame. He couldn't blame himself for their deaths. Peter took his mask off with tears, sitting down on the skyscraper. He looked at his mask. All Spider-Man has ever done was bring pain to other people. MJ could never understand this. Being a hero was the most challenging thing, and he thought that maybe his dreams of being an Avenger, being that friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, were put to rest. MJ tried to take Peter's mask. Before moving it away from her, there was a silence. The two just looked at each other. MJ said Captain America might be able to help him, until Peter said he would help himself, dropping the mask down below. The mask flew in the air as the two watched it go down the bridge. Peter said, "Sometimes you need to give up what you want the most, even your dreams." Peter had enough of these games. The time for being a hero was over. Letting the big players take over was something he thought about for a while. Peter took MJ back to her place before Parker walked away with his head down into the darkness of the night. At the same time, a loud mechanical noise could be heard echoing in the room. Tony Stark continued to build his Iron Legions. He would never take a break until he snapped, throwing his booze to the side of the wall. It smashed into his face, leaving a big gash on his cheek. Tony still wouldn't give up building. Both his hands were shaking, and the music in the background became became distorted. Tears filled up with each passing moment. He flipped over the table and threw all of the parts away, blasting everything in sight before dropping to his knees. Stark realized he had blasted one of the only pictures of him with Morgan. He picked up the shattered photo and cried. Tony thought to himself, why did it have to be this way? After trying to protect everyone, the only family he had he couldn't protect. A terrible knot formed. The guilt was too much for him to take. Tony thought about taking his own life to be with his family, but at the same time, he was Iron Man. He could gain his family back, but it would take everything to do it. An idea sparked in Tony's mind. He thought, what if he could somehow build a multiversal teleporter to send him to a world where his family is still alive? Knowing what he needed to do, Stark started building manically. The next day, Peter met with Ned and MJ at the school caf, talking about how they were getting prepared to go to MIT after being accepted. Ned asked Peter how he would balance college life and Spider-Man. Before the news hit in New York City, Spider-Man No More, the Daily Bugle, had found Spider-Man's costume in an alleyway. J. Jonah Jameson confirmed that it was the official suit and that Spider-Man gave up his crusade. Flash, who was in the caf, couldn't believe his eyes, yelling at everyone about the breaking news. Peter put his head down. Ned was confused and asked Peter why. Peter snapped at them. He said he was the one who was always sticking his neck out for others and looking at what it costs, the death of Tony's family. Although Steve Rogers was training him to become a better hero, there's always going to be the sacrifice play. And Peter said he didn't want to do the same thing that happened to Tony. He just wanted to be a normal kid from now on. Peter grabbed his backpack before running off. He slammed the doors to the top roof. As he left the school, he got a phone call from May. He took his phone out and listened to the call, where she said with great power, must, before Parker hung up the call. His spider sense went berserk. A loud sonic boom knocked Parker to the back wall. He fell to the ground looking at his nose with blood dripping down it. Parker saw from the distance robots flying in all sorts of directions. Tony Stark's Iron Legions were deployed everywhere in the world. Some robots flew throughout the city. One of them is near the school. Peter looked to see them walking everywhere before Peter's spider sense went off. The robot extended his hand out before blasting a hole through a car, instantly killing the driver. Screaming echoed in the distance, and more shots were heard in every direction. Peter was shocked at what had happened. The robots were going after anyone who had broken the law, and even broken the law previously, even if it was a petty crime. Tony's Iron Legions were spread out, killing without any mercy. Peter knew this wasn't the way to deal with criminals. It went against his beliefs. He took out his web shooters, and at that moment, before an Iron Legion could kill again, Peter webbed up the bot before knocking it back onto a wall, killing it. Its head rolled near Peter before blowing up in front of him. The rest of Tony's Iron Legions created a target for Peter Parker. After attacking one of the bots, this caused the Iron Legion to categorize Peter Parker as a criminal. He knew that something was wrong. Peter dodged the rest of the robots on the street, and people at Midtown heard noises coming from outside. They ran outside and started crowding the area. Parker fought one after another on the street and started looking back on his shoulder. Seeing people with their phones out, he screamed, telling all of them to get back. Peter told them not to engage. He was shot in the left leg, screaming in pain, falling to the ground. He screamed, webbing the rest of them up. Peter couldn't think of how the rest of his life would play out. By the end of the day, everyone was going to know that he was Spider-Man. That didn't matter. Parker fought with no fear in his heart, no anger in his soul. He fought for the greater good, to protect his friends. Maybe he was wrong about Spider-Man. Maybe everything leads up to this point. Parker had flashbacks of him and Tony when he first became Spider-Man. While Peter was getting shot by unibeams in all directions, he could only think of the good times. At that moment, before he heard a voice in his head telling him, "You did good, kid," before Peter looked around everywhere, closing his eyes. Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Spider-Man dead. The Iron Legions executed Peter Parker on the street, shooting him dead. Parker's body fell before the robots flew away, saying target eliminated. Ned and MJ cried out, running to Peter's aid, but it was already too late. The Iron Legions continued to cause havoc in the streets. The crowd of people took their phones out, and the world knew what was happening. Parker's death was being projected to everybody who lived in New York. Everyone wanted to know what was going on, and when the news hit, and Captain America found out, he was mad. Rogers rushed to Stark's home, realizing what Tony's actions had caused. Stark had created his multiverse teleporter, with a unique world that might have his family. Steve Rogers went there with an intent to kill his former friend earlier, before the Iron Legions were deployed to kill every and any criminal. Tony was drunk and depressed about everything. He knew that the world had tricked him, and he felt as if he had been conned. He continued working on the machine and was prepared for the finishing touches, but before he could click the button, he felt someone was watching him. Strange flew below to meet with Tony. Doctor Strange asked how he knew he was here, and Tony just said that he knows when his cloak waves in the air. Tony smiled and asked Steven why he was there. Tony asked what he wanted, and Strange said that what you got there, you can cause chaos in the multiverse. Doctor Strange explained that if Tony does this, it could create an imbalance that would cause the multiverse to break open into madness, and there will be no way home for him if he travels. Stark's patience were lowering. Tony said he needed to do this for his family. He couldn't live without them. Stark called Steven a hypocrite for seeing multiple universes play out when they defeated the Mad Titan. Stark then blamed Strange for everything that happened to him, and Strange said that it was the only way. Stark pressed the button. Strange then used a spell by multiplying himself that created a holographic duplicate of Strange, trying to tire out Iron Man. Doctor Strange then went behind Stark, knocking him out of his body. Doctor Strange said, "We never lose our demons, Stark. We only learn to live above them." Tony watched himself floating away from his body, looking at his missing arm. Tony agreed that he would live above them after having his family back, before some of Tony's Iron Legions caught Doctor Strange off guard. Tony went back into his body, taking the opportunity. The Iron Legions then proceeded to fight with Strange. One of them managed to grab Steven by his neck, pinning him to the ground, before Tony activated the worldwide Iron Legion alert, alerting all of them to help aid him. Tony clicked the button, getting ready to jump into the multiverse, before Strange, the cloak came from behind, choking Tony. Stark used his unibeam to blast a hole through the cloak. As this happened, Doctor Strange summoned daggers, throwing them into the machine and breaking it. With his last powers, Stark screamed no. The machine caught on fire, and Stark tried to fix it, but he was electrocuted. It was giving Tony third-degree burns on his face. Strange yelled for Tony to stop, and Tony flew back from the explosion, defeated. Doctor Strange grabbed his cloak, walking over to Tony's body. He was getting ready to kill him, but Tony jabbed a nanoblade through his gut as he was about to say his goodbyes.